It's lovely to be here today to have a super in-depth chat with Sophie Comas of RIMU Marketing. Nice to see you. How are you?
I'm all right, Fiona. Thank you for interviewing me today. Really appreciate your time. And it's a bit weird being on the other side of the fence.
I bet it is. I bet it is. I'm in my sort of more comfortable chair throwing questions at you, but I know we'll all be very excited to hear more about your background, before marketing, your marketing life, and what you see for the future, and just learn a bit more about you, the person behind the brand. So, how long have you actually been in marketing?
Oh, do you know what? I was thinking about that. I think it's probably about 25 years, which I can't believe. That just makes me feel really old. So I had a 15-year corporate marketing experience and background. And then I've obviously been doing RIMU marketing for the last 10 years.
Yeah, and that does add up, doesn't it? But then think about the depth and breadth of experience that you bring to the table. You must have seen quite a few changes in that time as well, or maybe the fundamentals are all still very similar.
Do you know what? That's a really interesting question. There's no doubt that the technology element of things have evolved and transformed over that period of time. But if you look at a lot of the marketing theory, a lot of it is still applied. It's just maybe perhaps we're revising and changing the way that we're applying things. So when I first started out, for example, I was still sending out faxes to hotel chains. What are faxes? I hear those younger audience viewers
Yeah.
saying. But email was only really just becoming more of a thing. Social media didn't really exist. So yeah, things have really changed quite a lot in that time frame for sure.
Yeah, and I suppose it's not just the bits that you've implemented, it's that you could argue have the audiences changed, but maybe our needs and our wants are slightly changed, but at the end of the day, where you're still selling to people, aren't you? It's still businesses that you need to relate to. So I suppose there's a couple of, as you say, lots of things don't change. But what got you into marketing? What was your background? Or is that the very first thing you went into? Did you just have a passion for it that you knew that you had to fulfill?
No, that's a good question. So I started within the hotel and travel sector. My degree is actually in travel and tourism, and the degree was kind of business studies with a view to tourism, the tourism sector and tourism industry. So one of the modules that I did study was around marketing, and I always found it really interesting, even when I was studying for my degree. And as I came out of and finished my degree, I did my finals and then went on to do my CIM qualification straight after. But I started out in sales. That was really where my career started. And I was actually very good at sales. I was working for Travel Bag in their flight centre in Piccadilly, which was great fun when, in your early 20s, you're wanting to enjoy London life and going out and doing things. There was an office with about 150 of us there. And by the time I left, I was probably their third bestseller. So I think
Oh,
the
fantastic.
it was a surprise when I said I'm going on to do something else.
But actually, I think sales is one of those tools and skills that you can apply to whatever area you are in. So that's really good sort of core learnings, isn't it? Not, even though you're not sort of direct selling now, everything, at the end of the day, a business relies on sales. So
Mm.
you know exactly how to link the two together.
Definitely. I think although it's interesting, I'm actually doing a sales course at the moment and reminding myself of some of those principles. I definitely think I'm more suited to a marketing approach. I think one of the reasons I decided to move on from sales was I realised that I would always want to try and beat my previous objectives or successes of the month before. So when you're in sales, of course, the better you do, the higher your targets are, the more you have to do, and it was kind of this cycle. And I realised that perhaps that wasn't the right way forward for me.
And also, I suppose you can apply your strategy and all the bits of it. I know that you're very good at because those bits that need to be put together to move forward. And I suppose in sales, perhaps there's less of that, less ability. But when you started in marketing, where did you start?
So I actually moved from sales into product. So after working for Travel Bag, I then went to work for First Choice in their product department. And that was brilliant. I got to see some great places. I went to Egypt on a resort trip and saw about 7 destinations in 7 days. I got to go to Lapland and test out a new product that they were in the process of launching, as well as doing some perhaps more kind of obvious visits, like going to Benidorm, of all places, Portugal. So I was really lucky to be exposed to quite a lot of different experiences really very early on in my career. And I think travel for me has always been, it's always been part of my DNA. My dad definitely had itchy feet, and he kind of instilled that love of travel and exploring new places and cultures and things, which, I still really enjoy today.
That's lovely. So it's in your DNA. And I think it's also lovely, as you said, that you experience such a broad range of destinations. And that's obviously just one side of it, the destinations. But because it does, there is something for everyone. And as much as sort of, as you say, when you laugh and you said Benidorm, there's still a lot going for it. And it's nice to be able to witness it for yourself, isn't it? Rather than just hear what other people have said about their visit
Yeah.
there. So very good research is what I'd say.
Definitely.
Um, And so where you are today, and obviously we talked a bit about the beginning, how did your sort of career morph and materialize into where you are now and look at what you stand for? And so tell me a bit about that.
Yeah, so I suppose so when I was at First Choice, I had the opportunity to move across into marketing, because I think when I was younger, I was really lucky that I had the exposure quite early on to experience different departments and different disciplines within a corporate organization. So I started with sales, I moved to product, and then I was able to then move across into marketing, which was really exciting. And actually, I very quickly realized that that's really where I wanted to be and where I wanted to then take my career as we move forward. I left First Choice, which is a tour operator, obviously, and then moved across into the hotel sector. I then worked for 10 years for IHG, supporting their Holiday Inn and Crowne Plaza brands, both in a UK capacity and a European capacity as well. So that's really where I think I kind of cut my marketing teeth, if you like, and really embedded a lot of the principles and the practices, the theoretical practices that I had learned when I was studying. So really loved doing that. Again, got to go to some great places, get involved in some great partnerships. I was lucky enough to go to Wimbledon on corporate hospitality, to get involved in the BTCC touring car championships, and also enjoy going to visit quite a lot of the intercontinental hotels across the world. So really enjoying, again, continuing with that love of travel. But then my eldest son came along. And like many mums, one child in childcare was fine, and I managed to negotiate a 3-day-a-week role, which worked really, really well. I got to work within the partnerships team for IHG for a while, alongside a colleague who I've worked with for some time. So that worked, and that kind of fitted. But then when my younger son came along, there was an internal change, as often happens, and it really became very evident that my kind of part-time role, if you like, no longer suited the organisation or suited me really either. I think it became very obvious that I was a bit like a round peg in a square hole. So I was made redundant, and I think it was kind of something that I wanted at that time. I was ready to do something different. I wanted to focus on my young family. My eldest son had just started school at that time, so for those parents out there, you'll know that crazy time of that first autumn term, where literally every week you've got sweets in jars for Christmas fairs, you've got fancy dressing up outfits to find, you've got stuff to bring in. It's a job in itself. And I remember thinking, kind of about 2 months in, my God, if this is what school life is like, how on earth am I ever going to go back to work? Because I can't balance everything. I was really lucky as part of my redundancy to negotiate some outplacement support. And part of the idea that they presented through those conversations was the idea of working for yourself. It wasn't something I'd necessarily ever thought of, but long story short, I decided to give it a go. And you can probably guess the rest of the story, because here I am 10 years later. So
yes, but isn't that's lovely. Obviously, it just goes to show it was meant to be. And often it's funny, isn't it, when you reflect on a story like that and your career path or journey, unintentional as it may have been at the time. Is it fate? Those kind of things. It was meant to be. As you said, you hadn't even thought about setting up your own business. Thank goodness for that course. But likewise, maybe you'd have found it another way, because you say it was destined for you, and you're here, as you say, however many years later. And so obviously you've got a full-on role. Marketing's one of those things, isn't it? It's a very, very broad spectrum. Is there an element that you enjoy the most?
Oh, no question. So I love my clients. I think that first and foremost has to be the bit that really gets me up in the morning. I am incredibly lucky that over the last 10 years, I've had the pleasure of working with some fabulous businesses, and they've been really diverse. And actually, I've loved that diversity. So where when lots of people change jobs or organisations, actually within working for RIMU and working for myself, I've had the flexibility to literally pick and choose the businesses and the companies that I want to work for. And I've loved it. I've worked with coaches, I've worked with interior designers, I've worked with sports businesses, I've worked with wellbeing businesses, even equine businesses, and you'll come on to see why that's really exciting for me personally. But I even had the pleasure of working with a canine dog massage therapist, and she was amazing. She was brilliant. So I'm really lucky to have had that diverse experience in different sectors, and we work on a number of different projects. But I think for me, the bits I really enjoy is without question the strategy piece, the blue sky thinking bit, the idea generation. I know when I have my strategy sessions, my brain literally goes into overdrive, and I kind of almost have to start scribbling really quickly because I have all of these ideas for the client as we start thinking about things. I love the writing piece, so I really enjoy blog writing as well, and email too. So I'd say those are kind of the real key bits that I really enjoy as part of my role day to day.
Isn't that the dream job then, if you enjoy so many different elements and you've got lovely clients too? And it's lovely hearing the broad spectrum of clients that you've worked with, because it just, that the knowledge and the insights you get from such a wide range, and there are probably sort of links as well, which you can bring into it as well, partnerships and getting clients to perhaps do something together. But of course, with every positive in a role, there must be something that perhaps you don't enjoy, shall we just say, quite as much.
That's a tactful way of putting it. Yeah. Okay, for me, without question, it's accounts. So I decided very early on in the business when I was just starting out. So just created a really simple, basic website. And I remember having a conversation with my husband to say, I don't really know where this business is going to go or how it's going to work, but I don't want to be there on the 31st of January at midnight submitting my tax return, which I knew I would be. I'm very happy to do bookkeeping ongoing. I'm very happy to do invoicing, but come accounts in the end of the year, I just want to say to my accountant, here you go, please help.
But it's a classic example, isn't it? They know what they're doing. They're the experience. Why sort of, it's not just obviously time, but angst, stress. And if you can, it's well recognized, I think, just outsource from the outset, and then you can focus on the things that you do enjoy and are good at. Now, this is one of my favorite questions. I think it sort of sheds a lot of light on sort of getting to know and understand people. But could you possibly describe yourself in 5 words?
I found this really hard, and I've actually had to write some notes, so I don't give me. I'm going to look at them for a minute. So I did actually kind of sense check with my family last night, going, "Oh, I've got we're doing this." True. What do you think? So the 5 words I chose were loyal, organised, curious, determined, and adventurous. And actually, I'd like to put fun in there because I'd like to hope that the passion for what I do also shines through and is kind of infectious with people as we work together.
I think yes, knowing you as and I can't claim to know you as obviously as well as your family. I think between you've chosen some very accurate words. But the one I love, and I know you've added in a 6, which I shall let you have. The one I love is perhaps the most is adventurous, because obviously that can apply to anything in business. But does that mean sort of what was the last adventure you went on then?
Oh, so my last adventure was this summer, and we had an amazing trip with my 2 boys, my husband, and my in-laws. And we went to Vietnam, Cambodia, and Singapore, and we saw some amazing places. And it was fabulous. It was a real adventure, a real journey of discovery. I'd never been to any of those kind of cultures before, if I'm honest. I've been to Hong Kong very briefly some years back on the way to Australia, but otherwise very different experience for me. And I have to say I loved it. The food was fabulous, the people were amazing, and I highly recommend those destinations.
Oh, how lovely. That really is an adventure, isn't it? And the kids, I'm guessing, at a really good age, well, they'll remember that. And you're making memories, aren't you? That's lovely. Oh gosh, so where's next on your bucket list?
Next is skiing, so
Oh,
a kind of adventure, but yeah, more of a physical adventure from a sports perspective. But yeah, I love it. I'm not particularly good at it, if I'm honest, but I love the snow. I'm really sporty. In my head, I should be an Olympic skier. The reality is quite different.
it's a bit like don't film me skiing because I think in my head I'm like I can get down looking reasonable and then the sort of illusion is shattered. But
Unless you're going to put it on fast forward, and then in that case, it's fine.
that's a good idea. So obviously you're very active. We've picked on that up on that already. So are there sort of any other things you enjoy doing in your spare time that really, you feel you do regularly that are sort of part of what makes you you?
Yeah, so I've obviously got my two boys. I've got two boys, they're 15 and 13 at the moment, so very much into the teenage years. So really kind of old enough, as you say, to enjoy those kind of experiences. And they're doing some great things in their own right too, just watching them kind of blossom and grow and become into the young men that they're going to be is a real privilege and a real pleasure. I love traveling, as I kind of mentioned initially. I've got a Springer Spaniel, Tilly. She's 4 in January, so really enjoy spending time with her. She's really very cute and far too clever for her own good, that's for sure. But my real passion is I love horses. I've always loved horses. Unfortunately, I'm not riding at the moment. But yeah, I think they're most majestic and beautiful creatures, and I miss not having them in my life. So that's something for me to think about for 2025.
Oh, good. So you can go back yeah,
Yeah.
excellent. So
Yeah.
that's what you mentioned earlier about the horse, working with your horse client,
Mm,
because that's sort of there's a just sort of direct affinity, I suppose, with clients like that. Oh,
absolutely. Absolutely.
lovely. And I'm also going to say, and I might, don't you also, aren't you a bit of a tennis fan as well?
I am. I love tennis. Yes. Well remembered. We still need to have a game, but yes, I
Yeah.
love tennis.
Yeah.
You're right. I do enjoy that too. And Pilates as well. I enjoy that
Okay.
as well.
So you keep very active. So when you went to Wimbledon all those years ago, that must have been an absolute highlight to such a special place, isn't it?
It was, and actually, I've been really lucky over the last 4 or 5 years or so. I've managed to secure tickets for Wimbledon. So I've been able to go. My husband and I really enjoy just going for one day, go and sit where I think court one we normally get, just sitting, enjoying watching the tennis. It's an amazing venue, great atmosphere. But yeah, I think the corporate hospitality is a whole nother level.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's yeah, great experience.
And that's often what you have to say goodbye to when you start your own business, isn't it?
Yes,
But
yes.
I'm glad to see that you're still indulging in your love of Wimbledon there, making it work for you. Now, is there something that you'd like to share with us that we perhaps don't know? I've got something, but I'd like you to go first, something that perhaps is not common knowledge about you.
Okay, so when I was doing my degree, I wanted to learn Spanish. So I went and repped a season in Ibiza, which was interesting. I learned a lot, and I have to say it was immensely useful to be able to speak Spanish at 3 in the morning when a bus driver suddenly decided that he couldn't speak English.
And is it like we all sort of
Yeah.
hear about the sea and oh dear.
Well, one of part of the island is the rest of the island I've fallen in love with, and without a shadow of a doubt, is one of my most favourite places of all time. So yeah, if you kind of step away from the San Antonio, Playa d'Embosa areas and venture more into Ibiza town and out into the countryside, it's an incredible island. I love it. It's beautiful.
You obviously got the time to explore it properly, and which is lovely. Yeah, there's two sides to every story. And also I think it's jolly hard work. One mustn't forget that. We always hear the sort of the horror stories, but it's very hard, full on
Yeah.
work, isn't it?
Yes, it was. Yes.
Yes. What I was going to share, which obviously you will know, Sophie, but perhaps others might not know, did you not enter for an award recently?
Ah, yeah. Yes, that is correct. Yeah, I was absolutely thrilled to bits. So I entered the Maidenhead and Windsor Chamber of Commerce Business Awards 2024. as a best micro business. And yeah, we won. RIMU Marketing won. So absolutely thrilled to bits. But it's not just at RIMU, we're a team of associates, so it's not just my hard work. Actually, it's also the people behind the scenes that work alongside me, that support me with the client work. Really, it's as much for them as anything else, because I can't do this by myself. So, working with you on certain projects, as we have done in the past, has been amazing, and really that kind of is really rewarding in itself. And actually, I should have said that earlier, as part of the thing that I really enjoy about my job, the collaborations that I have with other marketeers and the clients is it's just fantastic. It's brilliant.
Well, congratulations on that. Thoroughly well deserved. And that is a big deal. Micro business, that's there's a lot going on in a micro business. And I know you said it's a team effort, but you are the leader, the inspiration behind it. So very well done on that.
Thank you.
Now thinking about sort of as you go into the future, obviously you've got plans for your business, which we'll come to in a bit, but you've just said you've been working in marketing for 25 years. If you were starting out now, if you were talking to your younger self, do you have any words of wisdom or advice that perhaps you'd obviously tell your former self, but that perhaps would also be relevant to someone thinking about going into marketing now?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think what I'd say to myself is things have a way of working them out. I think I mentioned earlier about that point when I had a young family and I was in that time of transition, and I just didn't really know how things were going to pan out. And I think, to your point, somehow these things have a way of working themselves out. So just to believe a little bit that will happen. And actually, as you close one door, there are often lots of opportunities that are presented to you. I think the next thing I would say is take a chance as soon as you can. So if you think that this is something that you might want to explore, get out there and start doing it. Have the confidence to make an effort. So if anybody listening to this is kind of on the fence of, oh, do I leave the corporate world or not? Actually, I think the biggest realization that I left is actually most people make a living working for themselves or as part of a small business. Actually, proportionally, much fewer people work for a large organization. But when you're in that world, it doesn't feel like that. So actually, just to understand there is a world outside of the corporate environment, which is very, very different. It's much more agile. It's much more responsive. So whilst you don't necessarily have the budgets the corporate world would, actually there's a lot to it, which is really quite exciting. So I think they would probably be my key learnings or key pieces of advice.
To I suppose to say, well, I mean, you're where you are now, but I suppose it's okay to say it's going to be okay. But I think you're right. But even that aside, as a younger self, you don't the sort of the worries you have. You look back and think, no, that leap of faith. Just as you said when you went on your course, and they said, oh, have you thought about setting up on your own? You had the guts to do it, but it is a huge leap. But what you're saying, and I think so many of us can say, is do it. Do it when it's right, but do it because obviously you'll never know if you don't. But it's not the sort of, what's the word, the worry perhaps that it might be. It's just very, very different. Yeah.
And I think one other thing would be to say that if it is something you want to do, kind of save for it as well, because often the root of the fear is not having enough money to do whatever you need to do, so to pay your mortgage or whatever. So to kind of almost get a 6 months of funding behind you. I was lucky I had a redundancy payment that kind of provided me with that. So I think as long as you do due diligence, do your research, take time to work out what it is that you want to do. If you want to kind of almost do two things in parallel, to continue with your day job and learn extra skills on the side, plan for it, put a plan in place to take the steps to get you there. And I think one of the best pieces of advice somebody gave me when I was first starting out, I actually met her at a networking event earlier on this summer. And she said to me, the one piece of advice I can give you is get as many networking events in your diary as possible. And it was really interesting because by going out and literally starting to talk to people, it generates opportunity. So yes, you need a digital footprint behind you, because then you have the confidence to give a business card out or pass on your details if you want to do it virtually these days, to say, this is me, this is what I stand for. If you've got that foundation in place and you're happy with it, you will talk to people, you will start giving out your details. If you're clear then on how you can help people and the pain point you offer, which often can be quite difficult to do, by the way, but once you can get some clarity on that, actually that then makes it a lot easier to start sharing your details and start saying, okay, I can help you with this. Start small and then build from there. And the other thing, say yes to everything. And if you think in your head, how the hell do I do that?
Yeah.
Find somebody to help you.
Yes. But it's also that the validation, and you're quite right about that. I like that about going to networking because, and you described it very well, because you have a seed of an idea, and you get to a certain level, but by discussing it with other people, as you say, it's that sort of validation of saying, this is my card, this is what I do. And you obviously, I'm not just talking about the words which you can refine, but it then sort of becomes official in your mind as well, rather than thinking, oh, I think I might do this, or I'm not sure about that. You have to start taking ownership. But it's also very interesting because you've just given yourself, your former self, advice on running a business or starting a business. What about advice to someone who's perhaps thinking of going into marketing?
Yeah, so I think marketing, you alluded to it earlier. I think there's some principles which are very much still the same as they always have been, but the technology and perhaps the way in which it's delivered has very much evolved over recent years. So I think my advice would be to make sure that you have an understanding of those basic principles. I mean, one of the things that absolutely fascinates me is how through our communication, we can encourage people to take certain actions. So whether it's to buy a holiday, whether it's to engage in our product or service, thinking about the language and the mechanics and the routes that we need to activate to encourage those actions I always find absolutely fascinating. But I think getting those base level of principles and an understanding of the marketing channels and how it all kind of fits together is really, really important.
It is, and it must be nice as well, because you said you took time out to go and study for your marketing qualifications. That must be a really good grounding as well, just to give
Yeah.
you that other insight. Or it could be confidence that it just, that you've done it, the principles, as well as having learnt them and applied them as well.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
Oh, good. But where do you see the future going? Obviously, it's we're coming up for the end of a year, the start of a new year's going to be upon us very, very soon. What do you see as being sort of challenges, if you like, or trends perhaps that for that we should be looking out for?
Yeah. So I've actually done quite a lot of work on this recently, and my latest blog is talking about quite a lot of these things. But I wanted just to kind of pick out three of those sort of key trends that I think we've been kind of seeing coming for a while, but really are just magnified as we go into 2025. So the first one is AI and technology. So technology has been, continues to evolve at a tremendous pace. AI in particular is really exploding, whilst it's only perhaps 2 years old, with ChatGPT being in place for that period of time. Actually, the way it's evolving and changing will impact our industry from a marketing perspective, from a job market perspective. It will impact us in a tremendous way. So we're already seeing some things in place. So Alexa and Siri are obvious examples. From a marketing perspective, you've got dynamic pricing, which is already in place. So think of the airlines and the demand and the way that those prices shift. Those things are already in place. But I think it's the evolution of ChatGPT where they're kind of almost trying to learn human behavior, and that will just continue to evolve and develop. But it's only as good as the brief that you give it. So that's where I think the human intervention will evolve to. At the moment, we need to be really careful and considered in how we use it. So use it for idea generation rather than to write a complete website, because you can spot it. I've had quite a conversation. As a words lady yourself, I'm sure you can. You see it. You kind of read something and you go, that sounds a bit weird. It's not wrong, but it just sounds odd. And then you kind of rethink it and you go, oh, it's ChatGPT. That's why it sounds a bit strange. I use that as one example. There's lots of other tools out there that people use as well. So I think AI and technology is huge. The next thing is the environment. So obviously with COP Summit and those sort of events going on, it's obvious that this is important. So not just from things like looking at big kind of car manufacturers and those kind of things, but even as solopreneurs, it's looking at what's our carbon footprint? How do what do we do with printed paper? How do we recycle ink cartridges? It's looking at our whole way of working to say, how can we be more efficient? Because if we start small as a small business owner, then actually that can then ripple out into others. With the rise of B Corp businesses, consumers are actively wanting to work or engage with businesses that are taking those principles really, really seriously. So for me personally, that's not just important for me, but for my clients as well. So I think that's going to continue to grow in importance for customers as well.
I just was going to say, I've noticed a lot of businesses, and this is where you will come in as a marketeer, whether it's in your copy or in the whole strategy, they're talking about the environment as well in their product. So particularly say in clothing, whereas it might just be, obviously a few years ago, no one talked about it. And then recently, or the sort of near recent future, recent past rather, it was a case of, yes, we are sustainable. And now there's so much detail about where a product's made, about its footprint, and so it's there and it's coming, it's creeping through, and it's actually part of the buying process now that when you consider a purchase. So it's definitely changing really quickly, and actually the human perception as well and needs will change as well as you look to buy a product online. Yeah,
and that's really important. So. So that's good. And then the final thing is this balance between personalization and customer service. So people are wanting to feel like a bespoke individual as opposed to a part of a mass piece.
Mm.
So yeah,
yes, personalization is absolutely huge, isn't it? And it's not just in addressing an email letter to the name, it's making sure that it's of interest to that particular person.
Yeah, definitely. Cool.
Wonderful. Was there anything else you'd like to mention to people listening today?
No, I think that's it. That's all good.
It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. I always love hearing about the person behind the business, little insights into your life and your hobbies, and sharing those wonderful tips. So thank you very much, Sophie.
Thank you, Fiona. Lovely to talk to you this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you then. Bye.